Willner from labyrinthofthepsychonaut.blogspot.com. Head on over to his website, obviously, to check out his latest material and check out some of his videos as well if you're not yet aware of what he's doing. He's producing some really excellent videos. And speaking of your latest one, by the way, it's as I mentioned before that we talked about offline, Steve. It's really nice looking. It's HD, as it were, and they're looking really slick. And you're turning out to be a really talented video artist, as it were, Steve.
Thanks very much, Henrik. Yeah, there's YouTube is really advancing what we can do with 1080p. I can now show people with my videos the way that I see them in my home. Full screen, full resolution. Funny enough, YouTube is, again, the sacred feminine, because YouTube is like the fallopian tube. So when you subscribe to somebody in their YouTube channel, you're subscribing. You're, again, under the sacred feminine. So there's some interesting little symbolism in that channel just in itself.
There you go. That's very interesting. Well, what do you think about some of the latest films then that have been, well, some are still yet to be released, obviously. We talked briefly about the new Alice in Wonderland coming out soon. We had the Imaginarium of Parnassus finally coming out as well, directed by Terry Gilliam. That was a really interesting movie. I saw it a while back. What's your take on the whole film? Did you see the full film yet, Steve?
I haven't seen the full film, but the trailers are phenomenal. Like you have Heath Ledger traversing these checkerboard mirrored gates, these wormholes. Again, significant of traveling through the water door, Aquarian rebirthing womb type symbolism, and lots of ascension symbolism too. There's a clip of a hot air balloon rising with this kind of weird Hindu looking face with a circumpunct dot on his third eye. And there's another film called Up. It's an animated film where it's all about this guy who's trying to ascend. He's got all these balloons on his house, and he can't reach ascension. He can't break free of duality because he doesn't want to leave the material behind, all his possessions and things like that. So he takes his house with him into the air. That basically hinders him from reaching this 0 point that we're talking about, because he cannot let go of his wealth, his material possessions, his things that have sentimental value to him. There's some interesting scenes also in the Dr. Parnassus trailer. Johnny Depp is standing in front, when they have him, his quick clip of his face, they have him standing in front of what looks like the boat that Osiris stands on. It's a common Egyptian hieroglyph where one of the deities, archetypes, is standing on a boat. Each side, it looks again like the horseshoe shape or the wormhole. And researcher William Henry, who I think you've had on your show a few times, talks about how that could be symbolic of a Stargate or symbolic of what they're doing at CERN, trying to find this God particle, that kind of thing. So even in the Dr. Parnassus trailer, you have symbolism like the Osiris boat, the boat of eternity. The Egyptian mystery schools are referenced. It makes you think of some of the obstacles and trials and tribulations they put some of their students through in Egypt, or supposedly, allegedly have, trying to reach the gate of actualization by ridding themselves of ego death. There's a possibility of one rites of passage that they used to do where they had the adolescents swim through a pit of crocodiles. And there was one route where they can easily get through the precariousness of having to go through crocodiles, where they don't even have to go in the water, and there's an exit at the back of the room. And the initiates that would take that exit would sort of fail the initiation, because what you were supposed to do is dive into the abyss, dive into the waters where the ibis bird pecks his head through very carefully to dive into the water door. And below the crocodiles was another exit, a subterranean exit, in which if they traveled through that one, then they actually achieved their rites of passage, because they showed that they were no longer afraid of dying, no longer afraid of death. And so the people that were courageous enough to do that became the leaders of the Egyptian society back then.
How about that? I was reading some really interesting stuff about the Great Pyramid as well. John DeSalvo wrote a book a while back called, I think, The Complete Guide to the Great Pyramid, or something like that, the Complete Pyramid Guidebook or something, which also showed some of these really interesting, passageways and things underneath the Great Pyramid in various, cavities and rooms that are carved there. Some have even been referred to as the abyss. It was believed back in the 16th and 17th century. I know when some of the British people and French people went there, explorers and so forth, they didn't know how deep it actually went, and they thought it was a bottomless pit. Things like this. But it was really interesting, and it just dovetails with what you mentioned here. Now, it seems to me that all these ancient societies as well, they had the same rites of passage in that sense. The Lascaux caves in France, for instance, you have a similar scenario as well. You send the boys who are supposed to become men of the tribe or whatever deep into these caverns, and they might even have been connected with some kind of entheogenic experience as well. They take some kind of hallucinogen or something like that, and in that sense become initiated in that way. But the pyramid overall, I mean, it's a fantastic construction, and it's just a massive complex, and it's difficult to grasp, how the project that must have gone into building this incredible monument.
Yeah, and you imagine what they looked like in their heyday. Like when they were originally built, they were like their cornerstones were golden capped. They were covered in ivory.
The casing stones, the white chalk. Yeah, it's incredible.
Sure. I mean, the entire Giza complex, the entire plateau area is a star map. I mean, it's undoubtedly a star map, and it doesn't just map out the Orion constellation. All of the surrounding pyramids and pyramids located quite south of the Giza plateau are all symbolic of, again, pointing towards this star that our ancestors came from, Sirius, the dog star. And it's funny when you could break it down with the language again. Something as simple as the word God being, a flip-around version of dog is not a coincidence either. I mean, what is a dog? It's someone that loves you unconditionally and can find you in the dark, et cetera, et cetera. And that's sort of exactly what we think of as God. So we're played against with the encryptions in our language, and it's very beautiful, the star map that's laid in Giza, and it's not the only one of its kind. Obviously, the architecture in Washington, D.C. is enlaced with several zodiacs, as Tessarian talks about often. The Pleiades, the seven sisters, is in the architecture of Rome, the seven hills of Rome. So you have, I think, the Solomon encryption pertaining to the way that they have the architecture laid out in Rome. And on certain dates, the Pope comes out and he kind of looks over these constellations. I think it's April 15th. That's a date that Dan Brown likes to release a lot of his novels. Also, the winter solstice and the summer solstice, they go out there and do the same thing. And on those dates, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's exactly, if you look at the Washington, D.C. monolith and the monolith that's in Rome, and right in the middle of that eight-pointed star, you know what I'm talking about, the architecture there?
Yeah.
It's exactly 33 degrees in the sky to the constellation Sirius, or I'm not sure if it's Sirius or it's what the Pleiades point to. But it's this major star system that our ancestors supposedly come from, and pay homage to these creator gods. They go out there dressed with the Dogon hat and the sort of masculine and feminine androgynous look. And they go out there with their bent staff, and they look at the stars, they look at the monuments, they look at the monolith, which is symbolic in a lot of ways in itself. The one in Washington, D.C. is 660 feet tall, so it's representative of, again, the beast or the carbon molecule that we all are made of. It's pointing towards the ladder in the heavens. The ladder is always extended down, like on the Freemasonic tracing boards, because the life of this planet came from that star, or at least that's what the mystery schools would like us to believe, that the gods came from this constellation, Thoth and whatnot. They came down here, built the pyramids, built all these incredible landmarks and architectures, and they're returning now to see, basically, to come observe the zoo, to see what we've been up to and see what this end times phenomenon is going to be like, and what the second Genesis is going to be like, because they've known about it for quite some time, since they supposedly live outside of time.
What do you think they refer to in terms of the second Genesis? Is it a reboot of the experiment? Does it mean that, excuse me, a lot of other people have to, go and they're going to restart it again? Or what do you think they're referring to?
Well, it certainly happens in the Matrix, doesn't it? But again, the Matrix, tricks are for kids, Henrik. We don't have to play to these polarities anymore. And I don't even think the star gods can completely describe and understand what our destiny is going to be like. Granted, if you go by the time river theory again, that the future seems to be written in the geology of the planet, and there's even a lot of passages written in the Emerald Thoth tablets and the an alternate text to the Bible that in their prophecies they talk about the gods actually digging out the Tigris and Euphrates and the Nile River, and how these rivers are basically created by the gods. And that's why the Giza Plateau is near Cairo, like we talked about, and that's similar to the word chiropractor. So it empties out into the river delta in a way similar to how we're basically approaching this water door, where we're going into the womb again and we're going to be rebirthed as a species. Do they know that we're approaching that? Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure some of these entities are responsible for the signs and things that in the skies that we're seeing. And also, it's probably just the Earth, because the Earth, I believe, is sentient and alive. And what happens when a woman's pregnant? They have birth pangs, the baby kicks, right? There's pregnancy pains. And even the idea that there's a gestation period of 9 months is quite significant. That's why you think